Program. The illustrated program for this evening's performance by James Whitmore as Harry Truman. You'll appreciate and enjoy the performance much more with the program. Take a program with your program. 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 The illustrated program. 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 The illustrated program.
And finally, Margaret, to be a good president, I fear that a man cannot be his own mentor. He cannot live the Sermon on the Mount. He has to be a Machiavelli, a Caesar, a Borgia, an unctuous religio, a liar, a whatnot to be successful. So I probably won't be. But I'm having a lot of fun trying the opposite approach. Maybe it'll win. Lots of love, Dad.
Say, Rose, are Mr. Johnston or Mr. Whitney there? They're there. Well, fine. What about the Attorney General? Tom Clark's there, and what about Charlie Ross? Well, good. Send them all in, Rose. Thank you very much.
Good morning, gentlemen. I see you, Mr. Johnson. You're looking very well, sir. Fine. Mr. Whitney, how are you, sir? Fine. Tom, Charlie, please stand right there. Well, gentlemen, what have you worked out on the proposed settlement? You mean to tell me that 18 of your 20 railroad brotherhoods are willing to accept the arbitration award, but you're going to stop the railroads from running anyhow? Well, boys, if I knew you were going to tell me that, I wouldn't have asked you over here this morning. The good Lord may have built the earth in 6 days, but that surely was before labor unions. If you think I'm going to sit here and let you tie this whole damn country up, you're crazier than hell. You've got 48 hours to reach a settlement. If you don't, I'm going to take over the railroads in the name of the government. That's all, boys. I said that's all, Mr. Johnston. Mr. Whitney? Well, Tom, Charlie, what do you think? No, wait a minute, Charlie. Listen, I know better than you do that their labor unions have always backed me politically, but this is not a case of labor versus management. No, sir. This is a case of a few big money boys in management and the war-rich unions against the government. And I'm going to teach them to exercise some social responsibility. Well, I'm trying to get this country back on a peacetime footing. And I am not going to have the private citizen getting hind hit on this deal. It's got to be fair all the way around, and this damned inflation business has got to stop. I'm going to take the hides off those bastards. And that goes for the National Association of Manufacturers crowd as well. They are not going to stampede me into lifting price controls. But, Charlie, you think we ought to consult some economists, do you? Well, let me tell you something. I stopped into some supermarkets on my walk the other day. And I don't need those economic wizards to tell me that this country's hurting. All you got to do is see how it's buying. No, sir, Charlie, only one way to stop this. And that's a few swift kicks in the right asses. Besides, if you laid those economists end to end, they'd point in all directions. I'll tell you, boys, if we leave this up to management, they'll have prices so damned high that you'll wish you were in the undertaking business. Just to pick up the newly dead. Why, they'll show us net profits or net greed so high, and it'll have every labor leader in this country screaming for higher wages. And they'll both be screaming that I'm interfering with private enterprise. Well, it's not going to happen. I tell you, boys, if we leave this up to management, they'll have prices so damned high, the average citizen won't be able to buy anymore. Well, and of course, that's exactly what management wants. Of course they do. They just yell sales lag. And then they lay off a whole slew of workers, and then the unions get panicky and tone down their demands and ask for less money, which is exactly what management planned all along. And then, of course, they give the working fella just enough to get him buying again on the installment plan, I might add. You know, they say that they're for competition, but they're for eliminating competition. And I am sick of this government being filed and flouted and the people bankrupt and ruined. I may have inherited this job, but by God, I'm in charge, and they damn well better know it. That's all, boys. You know, I never saw myself as president. I was just in the right place at the wrong time. Lots of folks in this country could do a better job than me, but it became mine to do. And as long as you put me here, you're going to get the very best I've got. I always thought of myself as a very ordinary man. I have no special personal endowments at all, but I don't waste time worrying about what I don't have. I just try to do the best with what I do have. And I certainly don't waste time trying to figure out how to say something or even do it. I think the important thing is to get it said and done. And I certainly don't waste time comparing myself to other men like Mr. Churchill or Mr. Roosevelt. There's no need to do that. Every man on this earth does things a little differently. And in fact, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the all-time great American snob, the Lady Astor. Well, she was a transplanted Virginian, and she acquired such a strong British accent that even the British couldn't understand her. Let alone stand her. Well, I happened to run into the Lady Astor at some function. I think it was down in Williamsburg, Virginia, and she made some rather unkind remarks about my Missouri accent. Well, I cut her short by saying at least my accent was natural. But Mr. Churchill, the point of my story is Mr. Churchill does things just a little differently. Now, he ran into the lady at some dinner party in London, the kind of party that Winston truly enjoys, and he derives much of his joy from imbibing rather large amounts of brandy. Well, he was seated next to the Lady Astor, and she undertook to give the Prime Minister a little lecture. She said, "Mr. Prime Minister, I think you are quite drunk." Well, Winston looked at her, and he said, "You're quite right, my lady. I am quite drunk, but you're quite ugly, and tomorrow morning I will be indisputably sober." Well, you see what I mean, anyway, don't you? Oh, Herbert Hoover's in town. Now, that's one of the problems with this job I've got. When you leave it, you got to find something else to do. No, really, think about it. It's hell for a man trying to find work when he's been president of the United States. Hackey, would you get me the Shoreham Hotel on the line, please? No, just put it through, Hackey. I'll handle it. Thank you very much. Great man, Herbert Hoover, in my opinion, honestly. You know, he did a great job after World War I, feeding all those poor, unfortunate, starving peoples over there in Europe and in Asia, and then we rewarded him with this job. And then the Depression hit, and we all turned on Herbert Hoover, but the Depression was not created by Herbert Hoover. It was created for him. Oh, heavens, and you know, most of us forget that he instituted the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. That was to keep the small businessman going when the big banks turned their backs on him, and of course the banks did. Boy, there's a bunch of crooks for you. Well, they're happy to lend you money when you prove you don't need it. You want a friend in this life, get a dog. Hello? Shoreham Hotel? Yes, yes. Would you connect me with Mr. Herbert Hoover, please? Harry Truman. Harry Truman. Yes, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's the one, yes. Well, nice chatting with you, too. All right. Mr. President, Harry Truman. How are you, sir? Well, it's wonderful. Oh, all right, Mr. Hoover. This is the president. Better? All right, sir. Well, it's very nice to have you in town, and I thought I might come up and see you this afternoon. Well, you feel you should come down here? All right, sir. May I send a car for you? Well, you better will. Right away? Absolutely. Be there in 10 minutes. Not at all. No. I'm looking forward to seeing you. All right, sir. Bye-bye. Hackey, would you send a car to the Shoreham Hotel to pick up Mr. Herbert Hoover, please? Oh, and Hackey, let me know the minute he arrives. All right, fine. Thank you, Hackey. Bye-bye. You know, there's one nice thing about this job I've got, that when you get it, you move into a rather comfortable, well-furnished house. It wasn't always that way, though. You know, in 1800, when John Adams and his Abigail moved in here, it was nothing but a great big unfinished barn. It had no heat, no furniture. Abigail hung her wash in the East Room. Thomas Jefferson was the first president to try to complete the White House and furnish it adequately. He did a very good job. He built the north and south porticos and those elegant terraces out there. Now, those terraces were built in Jefferson's day to hide the hen houses. They tell me the best-looking, best-dressed, and highest-living fellow that ever occupied this office was Chester Arthur. They said that he even looked like a president. And he kept a whore on the premises. Now, back home, we'd call a fella like that a widower with means. Since I've occupied this office, I rather hoped I might run into the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. I never have. Teddy Roosevelt, though, said he used to talk to the famous man all the time, but I'm sure being a Republican helped. Yeah. Oh, yes, put him through. Hello, Eddie. How the hell are you? Oh, really? Oh, yeah, well, Herbert Hoover's staying there, too. That's right. Yeah, when are you coming over to see me, Eddie? No, wait a minute, you bald-headed son of a bitch. Don't get started on that Israel thing, Eddie, or I won't let you in the front door. No, wait a minute. No. Well, I told you I'd get to it when I could. Eddie, wait a minute. Now, look, don't start to crying, Eddie. Every time you get on that Israel thing, you start to crying. Now, don't do it. Well, Eddie, I can't do things in this job as fast as you think I should. Wait a minute, Eddie. I've got a lot of other customers to think about here. Well, now, Eddie, wait. No, Eddie. I cannot invite Chaim Weizmann down to the White House, and you know that. Well, Israel's not a state yet, Eddie. No, wait a minute. Eddie, look here. I've got to do things in this job by protocol. Well, that means flags and dinners and invitations and... Well, what flag could the Waldorf Astoria be flying for Weizmann? Well, heavens alive. Well, I'll check with the State Department. Now, look here. Eddie, get over here. Can you get over here in about an hour? All right, fine. But, Eddie, don't get into that Middle East thing and don't start to crying, or I swear to God, I'll have you thrown out. All right, fine. I look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye. Say, Rose, would you have General Vaughn check with the State Department, see what we have to do to get Chaim Weizmann invited down here? And, Rose, listen, find out what flag the Waldorf Astoria in New York is flying for Weizmann, and we'll fly the same damn thing. And, Rose, tell General Vaughn if the State Department kicks up a fuss because Weizmann isn't a head of state or anything, just to forget about it. We'll sneak him in the East Gate and keep it to ourselves. You know that call I just got just now was from Eddie Jacobson, one of my oldest friends on the face of this earth. He and I went bust in business many years ago back in Kansas City. But that man Jacobson is what I believe this country really is all about. He is always looking to do something for somebody else, even though Eddie might need the help more than they do. I really always believe there's enough for every living soul in this country. If the vested few would just get it out of their skulls, that all benefits ought to filter downward. I really believe one of our biggest problems in this country is that financial control is in the hands of too few. And I've been saying that for a number of years. I suppose the first time I might have said it publicly, at any rate, was on the floor of the United States Senate in 1937. Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'll only be a moment this morning. If I might take a few minutes of your time, I'd like to discuss the cause that I believe for the unrest, the financial difficulties, the unemployment, and so on in our country today. And I believe that that chief cause is that we worship money instead of honor. A billionaire in this country is much greater in the eyes of the people than the public servant who works for the public interest. And it seems to make no difference if that billionaire rode to his wealth on the sweat of little children and the blood of underpaid labor. No, I am not yielding to the senator at this time, Mr. President. In fact, I would like to remind the senator, in fact, the Carnegie libraries are steeped in the blood of the Homestead Steelworkers, for heaven's sakes. No, I'm not yielding at this time, Mr. President. In fact, I'd like to, in my opinion, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Senator, we in this country worship mammon. Take Wall Street, for heaven's sakes. Now, you take Wall Street with its ability to control the very lifeblood of this country financially and to employ the best law brains in this country. Wall Street has yet to produce one financial statesman, and by that I mean a man who is able to recognize the danger of this bigness of business and this concentration of wealth and is willing to do something about it. Instead, Wall Street still employs the best law brains in this country to serve greed and selfish interest, and I tell you, there's going to be a settlement one day. Because there's going to be one unnecessary depression too many, there's going to be one receivership too many. And the people are going to demand a settlement because they can stand just so much. In my opinion, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we are building in this country a Tower of Babel. I yield the floor to the senator. Yes, Rose. Oh, Herbert Hoover's here. Fine, be right there. Mr. President, how are you, sir? Well, for heaven's sake, you look just great. Well, thank you. I'm going to make it one way or the other. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for coming down, Mr. President. Please have a chair. I'm sorry about that Mr. President stuff. No, I apologize. You know, Mr. Hoover, it's the same way with General Marshall. I could call General Marshall George. But for some reason, he's oldest general to me, and I don't know why that is. I'll try. Mr. Hoover? All right, fine, sir. Please sit down. Well, you look just grand. You look just grand. You know, I wanted to talk with you this morning about something, sir, that I think you know more about than any man on this earth. And that's the subject of human hunger. Now, we've got a surplus of food in this country, Mr. Hoover, and I would like to try to get it to the right places, mind you, in Europe and in Asia, where it'll help with the starvation business. Now, you did a great job after World War I, feeding all those poor, unfortunate, starving people over there, and I wondered, sir, if you would consider undertaking such a task for us again at this time. What is it, sir? Mr. Hoover, is anything I said, sir? Oh, no, listen, heavens alive, I guess ex-president's got a right to a little emotion just like anybody else, for heaven's sake. You'll do it. Well, when could you start, sir? Tomorrow morning. Well, that's just grand, Mr. Hoover. That suits me right down to the... You know, Mr. Hoover, I got to tell you something. The kind of help you can give us on this thing simply cannot be found just anywhere, and well, I'm most grateful to you, sir, and I'll send a car for you if I might. You bet I will. 9 o'clock at the showroom. It'll be there absolutely on the dot. All right, sir. Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Bye-bye, sir. Oh, Mr. Hoover, you're welcome, of course, to stay here in the White House. Well, you prefer the hotel. I understand that. Oh, say, speaking of hotels, you must know the folks that run the Waldorf Astoria in New York rather well, don't you? Well, living there and all, I figured you might. I may need your help in getting one of their flags. Well, that's right. If my striped pants boys can't handle it, I may be calling on you. All right, sir, fine. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. Absolutely. Bye-bye. Now, there goes one reason that I believe Congress should enact legislation designating ex-presidents honorary members of Congress. They'd have every right that every legislator has except the right to vote, but that way we'd get the benefit of their wisdom and their judgment in matters that beset our nation. And I tell you, if we don't get that kind of wisdom, we're just wasting a great national resource, in my opinion. Of course, we'd have to limit their right to filibuster, naturally. Especially if they were of the opposition party. But you know, if us old birds ever got to filibustering, you'd have to have a pulmotor and a physician in attendance. You know, it's amazing to me what this job of mine does to doctors. It seems to me that a fella no sooner takes his hand off the Bible than every doctor in the country is just dying to get down here to be the president's personal physician. I got a man to take it who didn't want the job at all, named Wallace Graham, Dr. Wallace Graham, and I only got Wally because I promised him that he'd have all of Walter Reed Hospital to operate on. I was ailing. One time I was ailing. Now, it wasn't anything serious at all, but it was ailing, and the word must have gotten out. Because Wally Graham got a call from a very famous doctor, a fellow named Chevalier Jackson. Maybe you've heard of him, Temple Medical School, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Well, anyway, Jackson had become famous because he invented a thing called a bronchoscope. Now, it's nothing more than a tube that you stick down people's throats and search around in their chest area. But he told Wally that he just had to get down here immediately and give me what they call a bronchoscopy. Well, Wally didn't want to insult the eminent doctor, so he put him on hold in the outer office, came in and told me. I said, did you tell him what my problem was, Wally? He said, I didn't have a chance, Mr. President. The man is practically on the plane down here. So I had the call transferred into me. Dr. Jackson. Yes, Harry Truman. Oh, well, I'm going to make it, Doctor, one way or the other. Say, Doctor, I know you're a busy man. You'd probably like to get the story from the horse's mouth. You would? All right. I don't know how you fellas work, but I'm sure before you start on a journey, you'd like to know where you're going. Yes, you'd like to have that tube of yours pointed in the right direction, would you? Well, Doctor, if you're willing to look at my other end, I'd be happy to have you take a peek. Because that's what I've got, Doctor, just plain old-fashioned diarrhea. Dr. Jackson? We never heard from the eminent doctor again. You know, I suppose that the president that suffered the most intense physical pain in this office would have had to have been Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson experienced excruciating migraine headache all the time he was in this office. But of course, Jefferson had a great psychological problem. He had a conflict between his heart and his mind. He was always in conflict with what he'd written in the Constitution, because during his presidency, he did virtually nothing to eliminate the institution of slavery, which he, of course, was fervently believed should be abolished. Interestingly enough, his migraine headaches ended only with his presidency, but I'm sure the man must have lived his own private, personal civil war for the rest of his life, and it probably only ended with his death. His was a gentle life, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. You know, I don't suppose a day goes by, really, when I'm in this office that at some time or another, however fleetingly, I don't think how Franklin Delano Roosevelt might be running the store. Oh, yes, Mr. Roosevelt, you're a tough man to follow. More than once I've heard myself referred to as his accidency. How do I like the job? Well, the pay's pretty good, and there's certainly lots to do. Of course, no matter what you do, there will always be some son of a bitch who won't like it. But it's the hottest kitchen in the world, I'd expect. Cigarette. Well, I don't use them myself, but I must have some here for visiting ex-president. Yep, here we are. You know, my Surgeon General tells me that these things may be causing lung cancer. That's right, lung cancer, and a lot of other things they say that are killing people these days. No, that's right. It can't hurt you now, can it? What do I think of Winston Churchill? Well, I think he's a fine gentleman and a great statesman. Stalin? Well, that's a little different cup of tea. I will say this for Uncle Joe, though. He is a most industrious, conscientious, and creative liar. Oh, well, I met him at Potsdam. As you know, I got all decked out in my preacher coat, and my high hat, and my low hat, and my hard hat. And, well, hard hats are mandatory when you're negotiating with the Russians. Now, when I got to Potsdam, this is kind of interesting. I learned the atom bomb worked when I got to Potsdam, and I told Stalin about it. And he just shrugged his shoulders like he'd known about it all along, which the son of a bitch probably did. Well, no, I didn't know we had the damn thing until you left us. No, then Secretary Stimson came in and briefed me on it. And after I got to Potsdam, I learned it worked. I told Churchill about it. He said we had to use it immediately if it would end the war. And my military people said we could save over 1 million casualties on both sides if we did not have to invade the mainland of Japan. Options? Didn't have any options. We just dropped the first bomb. We heard nothing. We dropped the second one, and they capitulated. Did it bother me? Well, Mr. Roosevelt, let me put it to you this way. If I had to do it again tomorrow, and I thought it would end the war, I would do it again without batting an eye. And I'll tell you something else. I have been waiting very, very patiently for somebody to apologize for Pearl Harbor. Well, it was an absolute crime, a tragedy that you couldn't have been there to sign that final Potsdam. Well, thank you, sir. Oh, I know, absolutely. Well, I couldn't understand. No. It was incredible. Churchill voted out of office in the middle of a major war and defeated by that little bird Attlee. No, Churchill took it hard. He never let on, naturally. But you know, he never lost his touch. When he heard about the election results, he said, Harry, always remember this about Clement Attlee. There's a lot less there than meets the eye. Well, I said he'd always seemed like a modest little guy to me, and he said, well, he's got lots to be modest about. Am I going to run again? Hell, I haven't run yet. You know, sometimes the pressures in this office get just a little borderline. And when that happens, I try to get home to Independence, Missouri, just as quickly as ever. I believe it's the isolation in that office that makes me feel that I've lost all touch with people. I have no idea what they're thinking. I don't know what their needs are. I don't know what they want. And I try to get home and kind of let my hair down, put my feet up, do a little quiet thinking. That's all, sort of, well, I suppose, just pull things down to their proper size. Of course, when I do get home, very often I do a lot less pulling than I do pushing this blamed lawnmower. Hello, how are you? All right. Well, nice to see you. Yeah, well, it's nice to be home on such a lovely Sunday. All right, fine. Good. Sue Gentry, how are you, Sue? For heaven's sake, let's go through it. All right. How are you? You looked at what? Oh, well, the fence. The Secret Service put it up, Sue, to protect me from what I do not know, but they put it up. What am I doing mowing the lawn on Sunday? The boss asked me to mow the lawn, Sue. That's why I'm mowing the lawn. Grass grows the same on Sunday, Sue, as any other day, you know. If I was on wages, I'd be on double time. You got to go to church, of course you do, and you look just grand. All right, fine, Sue. Have a good pray. I've got to mow the lawn, Sue. I found if you really don't want to do something, do it on Sunday. That way the boss will think you're tarnishing the Sabbath and never ask you to do it again. But you wait and see. It'll work out that way. Well, it takes time. I've always been kind of a Lightfoot Baptist myself. Most of my family were Baptists. I guess they felt the Baptists had the inside track to happiness after the grave. They must have the radio on. You know, speaking of my relatives, I guess my favorite relative of all would have been my grandfather, Solomon Young. He was quite a man, Grandfather Young. Very independent man, and he hated hypocrites. I remember him saying to me when I was just a boy, he said, Harry, if you ever run into a fella who shouts too loud on Saturday night and prays too loud on Sunday morning, go home and lock your smokehouse immediately. And he was absolutely right. I learned the lesson myself when I was 8 years old. Nine years old, the first job I ever had on the face of this earth. I worked for Jim Clinton in his drugstore down there on the square. And I went in at 6:30 every morning and swept out for Jim and cleaned up the medicine bottles from the day before. And I got to tell you, it was quite an education for a 9-year-old boy to see how many of the anti-saloon leaders, you know, the churchgoers, would come in every morning to get an eye-opener from Jim Clinton. Oh, yes, he kept the booze in the prescription department in the back and charged them 10 cents an ounce, and they would knock it back, and then they'd peek through a little tiny hole in the wall to make sure that nobody had seen him. My first brush with phonies, and I have never had any use for them since. I always favored the rough old birds. If they wanted to knock back a few, went into any saloon down there on the square. I never thought any real man had to hide behind a bunch of damn test tubes when he wanted to strike a blow for liberty. Of course, there are 3 things that'll ruin a man, in my opinion, and that's power, money, and women. You know, if a man can accept power as a gift from somebody else, he's all right. But if he thinks for 1 minute that he created the power, it'll ruin him every time. And if a man makes too much money early on in life, it tends to separate him from the rest of the human race that has to work all their lives just to earn a living. And, of course, if a man is disloyal to his family, well, that'll ruin him every time, because if you've got the right partner in life, you're not going to have too many troubles. Of course, if a guy's just looking to get some honey on his stinger, he's in one hell of a fix anyway. Well, now, wait a minute. On that last one there, you read your history and you'll find out I'm right on that one. I've had to wear these glasses ever since I was 10 years old. I had a rather bad case of diphtheria, and I was never very athletic. I almost ruined my eyesight. Never played much in the sports at all. Now, the boss was the tomboy in the family. Now, Bess used to play ball with all the kids. They never let me play. I had to umpire. And Bess could out-whistle any kid on our block. I'm going to tell you something now that is not generally known. Bess was shot put champion of Independence High School. My mother, Martha, got me interested in the piano and book learning at a very early age. She was a lovely woman, my mother. Of course, I guess all boys feel their mothers are lovely. But anyway, she was very musical, very artistic, college graduate. And she really flaunted the Baptist by attending dances. She was a real Lightfoot Baptist. My father, John Truman, was a very short, feisty man who liked to knock people's hats off when they weren't looking. They called him the Bantam Cock. He had absolutely no use for book learning on this earth. He quit school at a very early age, and he announced to his father that he was going to become a mule trader. And Grandfather Truman said it wasn't a very lofty thing for a boy to aspire to, but if he had his heart set on it, to go ahead. And always tell the truth and nobody'd believe him. My mother wanted me to attend college, well, I wanted to more than anything, but I couldn't do it, that's all. My father suffered from some rather bad financial setbacks, and I had to go to work. Timekeeping for the Santa Fe Railroad and bookkeeping for some... Oh, I believe the lady is maybe about to deliver me from my bondage. Yes, Bess, what is it, boss? What? I embarrassed your mother. What's up? What's out for the more, darling? What? I embarrassed... How did I embarrass your mother, dear? Well, but you asked me to mow the lawn, Bess. Well, all right, no, I'll stop right now. I don't want to embarrass your mother, absolutely. Oh, dear, she's on the warpath, is she? Oh, heavens, Bess, she's not on that again. Oh, why didn't you just... Bess, I'm going to run. If I can't beat Tom Dewey, for heaven's sake. Oh, wait a minute, Bess, would you try this approach with your mother? Would you tell her that not only am I going to run, I'm going to win? Will you try it? All right, please, dear. I'm sorry that I embarrassed her. Absolutely, Bess. Watch out for the more. All right, dear. I'll be in very shortly. Thank you very much, boss. Well, what'd I tell you? Wait a minute. I want to tell you a little something about her mother. Madge Gates Wallace is her name. She was known as the most stylish woman in Independence, Missouri. And her father, George Porterfield Gates, amassed a rather sizable fortune milling Queen of the Pantry flour. Now, I've known ever since I've met Bess that I was never Mother Wallace's idea of a proper son-in-law, but that's all right. Now, if she never did anything in her life but have Bess, that's good enough for me. And, of course, you all know the old saying, behind every successful man is a proud wife and a surprised mother-in-law. Well, that's the situation here. But I'll tell you, she's a pistol, though. Really, she is a pistol. Well, no, honestly, she's got a mind of her own. Oh, I'll never forget. As long as I live, the first time Mother Wallace saw this fence that the Secret Service put up around her house. Did I tell you that this is her house? Oh, yeah. Well, it's Mother Wallace's house. Anyway, Bess and I have lived here ever since we were married. But the first time Mother Wallace saw this fence, I tell you, the manure hit the fan. I tell you, she said nobody. Nobody. I don't care, she said, no government, no president, nobody is going to put up a fence around my house without my permission. Well, she finally simmered down, but I tell you, every time Mother Wallace goes through that gate, this fence cringes. You know, I once asked my Secretary of the Treasury, John Snyder, what this fence cost, and he told me $1,500. That seems like a lot of money, doesn't it? But let me tell you, a man in my job could get rich. I mean rich, if he really wanted to. Oh, yeah. But I learned a long, long time ago that when you play ball with the money boys, you pay. They don't. You pay. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Now, listen, I've done my share of favors for friends down through the years, just like any other influence peddler in Washington, but I never got anything for myself out of it, and I'll tell you something else. No man can get rich in politics unless he's a crook. It cannot be done. I got into politics in a rather ironic way, for me anyway. I got in through the military. I was in the National Guard in Missouri before World War I, and one of my fellow officers was a man named Jim Pendergast. And if I had not met and become friends with Jim Pendergast, I really don't believe I would be in this job today. When I got over to France, it's kind of interesting, I inherited an outfit, an artillery battery called Battery D. Now, they were known as the Dizzy D's. And they were known as the Dizzy D's because they were the wildest, hardest drinking bunch of Irishmen ever to stagger around the streets of Kansas City. Well, I will never forget the first day I met the Dizzy D's. They were all waiting for me because they expected me to chew them out. Well, I fooled them. Dismissed. Except the non-coms. I said except the non-coms. Well, boys, they tell me that your outfit is known as the Dizzy D's. Well, the D has surely got to stand for dumb. Because that's sure in hell what you are. All you've done since you've been in France is drink, fight among yourselves, and go to Mass. But I don't think there's a real fight in this outfit. Wait a minute, boys. Goddamn, I don't have to get along with you boys, but you sure in hell have got to get along with me. From now on, each one of you is responsible for the discipline in his squad and section, and anyone of you thinks he can't handle it, speak up right now. And I'll punch him right in the nose. Dismissed. We got along. In fact, when Battery D got into combat, it acquitted itself very, very valorously. However, I do remember one day we were bracketed by German artillery fire, and one of my sergeants panicked and ran to the rear, shouting we were all going to be wiped out. Well, before I knew it, my entire outfit was on the run to the rear, and right then and there, I learned the greatest counter-offensive weapon in warfare, cussing. Come back here, you goddamn mackerel snappers! You yellow Irish sons of bitches, come on back here! No, you're not Irish, you're not Irish at all, you're a bunch of goddamn limeys, 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 limeys! Go on, you yellow limey bastards, crawl out of the Queen's petty! Yes, I'm talking to you, Walsh, and you, O'Neill, and you, Carroll. No, boys, don't come at me, there are the Krauts. Get on the guns, boys! Fire, fire, up the Irish, up the Irish! We called that the Battle of Who Run. And when I got back from France, I married Bess. Her mother had some misgivings, but we went ahead and did it anyhow. And as I told you, we've lived in Mother Wallace's house ever since. You know, when I was courting Bess, I must have written her a silo full of letters. And after I became president, one day I walked into the living room in Independence and I found Bess down on her knees by the fireplace burning the letters. And I said she oughtn't to do that. And she said, why not? I've read them. And I said, well, think of history, Bess. And she said, I am, and kept right on. I've been back from France about 2 days when I ran into Eddie Jacobson on the streets of Kansas City, and we shook hands and agreed to go into business together. We opened a haberdashery shop in Kansas City, and from time to time, some of the boys from Battery D would stop by to swap lies about who'd won the war, and one of them was Jim Pendergast, the man I mentioned to you earlier. Well, Eddie and I did pretty well until the Depression of 1922, and then we had to go out of business, and Eddie went out on the road selling shirts for somebody else. And before I could get any kind of job, I found myself running for an elective office called county judge in Jackson County, Missouri. Not really a judge in a judicial sense, but more of a county commissioner in the rest of the country. But I found myself running for that elective office with the support of the Pendergast political organization. They were 1 and 2 in Jackson County, very powerful. And I got their support. I didn't know the big boss, Tom Pendergast, at all, but I did know his nephew, Jim Pendergast I mentioned. And Jim told his Uncle Tom that I was one officer in the war whose men didn't seem to want to shoot him. So they gave me their support, and I won the election. And I always figured I won the election because I had more relatives in the county than the other guys. And I was broke, and most of the voters are broke, so they went for a fellow who was in the same fix. But after I got elected, my biggest job was trying to get some roads built in Jackson County, Missouri. We had more mud roads in Jackson County than any other county in the country at that time. And you know, when you start talking about building roads and you've got the money to back it up, it's very much as though you were a female moth and unloaded your entire load of bombacol into the air in one spray. Immediately, you'd have 5 trillion males headed in your direction, and every one of them would be a road contractor. And I got my first taste of it when I got a visit from Tom Pendergast, the big boss, right after we passed the bond issue to build the roads. Mr. Pendergast, for heaven's sakes, what an honor. Well, sir, Tom, all right, Tom, you betcha. No, I don't. Mr. what? Ross? Nice to know you, Ross. All right. Ryan? Oh, yes. Baden? Oh, well. No, I don't know them, Tom, but I've heard of them. Well, what an honor. Please sit down, Tom. Right there, gentlemen, please make yourselves to home. All right, fine. Well, isn't this grand? What can I do for you, Tom? Yes, I'd heard that they were your supporters. I'd heard that, but I've got to tell you something, Tom. They're not very good road builders. Well, I mean, they're pie crust road builders. That means the roads they build are crumbling like pie crust, is what that means. Well, their bids were just too damn high, Tom, that's all. Yes, I know they pay their taxes here, but that doesn't entitle them to the money, does it? Oh, yes, I'm going to give the job to a bunch of them out of state. I certainly, well, their bids were lower. And, of course, the roads they build hold up. I've seen them. You leaving, gentlemen? Oh, all right. Well, come back any time. It's the same for everybody. No, sir. No, you don't know me very well, Mr. Pendergast, but I'm afraid you're just going to have to make do with what I think is right. No, sir. No, I don't believe I'm being contrary. I would hope to God I'm being businesslike. No, sir, I don't think you're interfering exactly. I would hope that it might be the beginning of an understanding. Yes, sir. Well, I certainly will do that, Mr. Tom, all right, I certainly will. Tom, I'll do what I think is right. Bye-bye. Shortly after that, it came out that Pendergast was a secret partner of those 3 men, and he had lost a considerable amount of money by my decision. But he never interfered with my work at that time or at any other time, even when he was in deep trouble and needed help desperately. And that happened in 1939 when he was indicted for income tax evasion, sent to prison. And his entire political organization fell apart, and it couldn't have come at a worse time for me, because in 1940, I had to decide whether I was going to run for another term as United States Senator. I had just completed my first term, and I wanted to more than anything on the face of this earth. I really believe the happiest years of my political life were spent on the floor of the United States Senate. More than that, I really believe that I had accomplished some good work for the common people of the state of Missouri. And I became convinced that I had accomplished something for the common folk of Missouri when I found out that every metropolitan newspaper in the state, save one, was opposed to my re-election. Also, in 1940, the leader of my party, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, withdrew his political support from me because he was going to run for a 3rd term as president, and I had backed legislation in the Senate limiting the election of presidents to 2 terms. So, naturally, he withdrew his support from me, threw it to a fellow named Lloyd Stark, who was then the governor of Missouri. Stark was a very wealthy man in his own right. He had all the big money boys behind him, and as I told you, all the newspapers, he had every Democratic organization, every influential Democrat behind him. And I obviously had 2 choices. I could fold my tent, steal away, forget about politics for the rest of my life, possibly, or I could get off my butt and do something about it, and I chose the latter course. I sent Roosevelt a wire, and I said I was going to run if I got 1 vote, mine. But I needed more than that. I knew that, certainly. I thought I might get labor. Now, I had been instrumental in pushing through some rather good pro-labor legislation in my first term as senator, and I thought the boys might remember and be grateful. But I needed more than that. I needed every single vote I could find. And you know, it seems to me that every man, politically, maybe personally too, I don't know, but it seems to me, certainly politically, that every man before he dies should finally stand up and say what he really believes in. Of course, if it can be practical at the same time, well, so much the better. Because at that time in the state of Missouri, we had about 2 million mules, and each one of them was worth about $90 apiece. But at the same time, we had 245,000 Negroes. And some people thought they weren't worth anything. Well, they were wrong. It was wrong, and I said so, and I did it on the courthouse steps of Sedalia, Missouri, June 15th, 1940. It was a blistering hot summer day in Sedalia, and Sedalia was a center for the Ku Klux Klan in the state of Missouri. So there wasn't a black face in the crowd. Friends and neighbors, if I could have your attention, please. For just a moment, we'll get out of this sun. What, Howard? I can't hear. Oh, Howard, could you get up on something? Well, maybe, well, wait a minute. Listen, Howard, I'll yell it at you. I've only got a very little bit to say. It's too hot out here anyway, and I'll yell it at you. All right. Friends and neighbors, I did want to say before this election, just for the record, that I believe in the brotherhood of man. But not only in the brotherhood of white men, I believe in the brotherhood of all men before the law. And I got to believe that if I believe, as I do, in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. Now, in recent years, we've all seen a mass exodus of the Negroes from the country areas here in Missouri into the large city areas. We all know the reason for that. It's lynchings, beatings, and 1,000 reasons. But the point is that when they have gotten to the large cities, the Negroes have been virtually ignored by the authorities. They're pushed into segregated slums. They barely have the necessities of life afforded them. And I believe as free men, they're entitled to more than that. Now, wait a minute, mister. Well, more than that, they're natural-born Americans, and more than that, they're human beings. All right, don't agree with that. I'll tell you something you got to agree with, though, brother. And that is, if we continue to push the Negro down into the depths of degradation, the white man's going to go down with him. Oh, yes, he is. Because the law of compensation will apply. Booker T. Washington said it. He said, if you're going to keep a black man in the gutter, there has to be a white man in the gutter to keep him there. I won that election by 8,000 votes. But you know, we've made some progress since those days in civil rights. I believe that. But I also believe that the Negro in our society still has to walk too fine a line just to survive. I remember an old Negro back in Grandview, Missouri, many, many years ago. He told me that he'd gotten a bottle of booze from his boss, and I said, how was it, John? He said, just about right, Mr. Chairman. I said, what do you mean, just about right, John? He said, well, if it was any better, he wouldn't have given it to me. If it was any worse, I wouldn't have drunk it. You know, I just mentioned the Ku Klux Klan just now, and I'm going to tell you, they were a power in our part of the country. Oh, I tell you, they could make or break a politician. Very often, they figured very prominently in my campaign in 1924. Now, they were a rough bunch. Of course, they were only rough when they were in a bunch. Oh, yes, well, they were racist. They were congenital racists, and I always believed that their philosophy was the absolute ultimate in vulgarity. This, of course, was their shield. Behind this thing, they felt safe. This, of course, is a torch. We all know its purpose was to give man light, but in their hands, this torch very often was the witness to lynchings, beatings, and murder. A bunch of the Klan boys came to see me, in fact, just before the election in 1924. They came to my office, and they said they had a problem with me. They said they understood that my grandfather, Solomon Young, was a Jew. But they said they were willing to give me dispensation on that. If I would join them, they said they would support me in the coming election. Well, I looked at those miserable creatures, and I said that my grandfather, Solomon Young, was not a Jew, but if he were, I would be very proud to say so, and that they could take their support and stick it where the good Lord intended all such things to be stuck. And we parted enemies. Thank God. You know, when a man stays in public life long enough, I guess he's got to expect almost anything to happen to him, but I think you've got to draw the line when your life is threatened. And it came to that because the Klan threatened to kill me. Now, Bess and I had just had our lovely little Margaret, and so naturally we both were very upset about it, but I knew in my heart there was only one way to handle the thing, and that was head on. So the boys were having one of their Klan powwows up at Lee's Summit, Missouri, and I thought it might be just the place to confront them. Now, I wanted to go alone, naturally, but my friend Eddie Jacobson insisted on going with me. And I've got to tell you, it was a very courageous thing for Eddie to do, because Eddie, of course, was one of the things the Klan hated most on this earth. Eddie was a Jew. evening, boys. I understand that some of you threatened to kill me. Well, if you want to take your lives in your hands, let's have a go at it right now. So you're the boys that are going to tell me that I can't hire a Catholic or Negro or Jew or whoever you don't happen to cotton to, huh? Well, being farm kin, you got to know that is pure, undiluted bullshit. Because I'm going to hire anybody I goddamn well please, boys. Those jobs are for all the people and not just a few hooded bastards like you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Calling yourselves the invisible empire where the good Lord should strike you from the face of this earth. Well, I'm going to leave you, chosen people. But wait a minute. Before I do, I want to tell you what Eddie Jacobson said on the way up here. Eddie said whoever organized your courageous gang had to be a Jew, because only a Jew could sell you, silly idiots, a $1.95 nightshirt for $16. Well, Eddie and I are going to try and find a saloon now and strike a blow for liberty. I lost that election. Oh, they beat me. They beat me. But you know, I was never prouder to lose anything in my entire life. Now, there's the whistle that was the envy of every kid on our block. She doesn't put the shot anymore, but she's still got to come with her whistle, doesn't she? That's my signal to stop jawing, would you? On this lovely Sunday morning. I'm going to have to go in now. The girls are going to give me an earful, but it sure beats cutting grass. Mr. Paul Hume. Music critic, Washington Post. Mr. Hume, I have just finished reading your lousy review of my daughter Margaret's concert last night. And I have come to the conclusion that you, sir, are an 8-ulcer man on 4-ulcer pay. When you write such poppycock as that, it shows conclusively that you're off the beam, and at least 4 of your ulcers are working overtime. I hope to meet you. When I do, you're going to need a new nose, lots of beefsteak for black eyes, and perhaps a supporter below. Say, Rose, would you bring me in 2 3-cent stamps, please? No, Rose, I don't want any lectures on my franking privileges. Just bring me in the stamps. Oh, and bring a book. Bring your book, Rose. Thank you very much. Well, this is the kind of morning that starts out with all the right things happening to make it all go wrong. First thing this morning, I got the communiques from Korea. And we're doing very, very badly over there. Then I had to tell Margaret about the death of our beloved Charlie Ross. He died yesterday at his desk unexpectedly. And he was Margaret's most special and most beloved friend. And when I tried to announce it to the press, well, anyway, then this damn thing. You know, it seems to me these critic fellas are just a little rough sometimes. When I was a father before I became president, I'm going to be a father when I leave this office. So that's the way it's going to be, Mr. Hume, you son of a bitch. No, Rose, not you, for heaven's sakes. Come here. Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much. Rose, would you sit down and take some dictation, please? Just a few short letters. All right, dear, fine, thank you. Now, the first one, Rose, is going to a congressman down in Louisiana named Abert, Edward Abert. What? Hebert? H-E-B-E-R-T. Is that Abe? All right, Hebert, fine, Hebert. Dear Congressman, yesterday one of my aides brought me a memo to the effect that you had called upon the churches of the land to set aside one day a week to pray to Almighty God to be my guidance and my wisdom. Well, Congressman, while I am most grateful for your concern for me and your possible influence with the Almighty, from what I know of the man, he's got a hell of a lot more important things to do, and sign that God's humble servant, Harry S. Truman. You want to cut hell of a lot? Fine, Rose, cut it out. It doesn't matter, cut it out. Makes it easier for you. All right, now the next one is going to Senator Bishop of Colorado. Dear Senator, not only would I not appoint John L. Lewis ambassador to the Soviet Union, I wouldn't appoint the old bastard dog catcher. Don't you want to cut old bastard, Rose? You don't? All right. You want to cut dog catcher? Well, how about Attorney General? That'd be worse. All right, but say, oh, Hackey, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but would you get me Sam Rayburn on the line, please? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Hackey. Say, suppose there's a story going around about me these days. It says that some old party hen is supposed to have cornered Bess at some party and said, Mrs. Truman, isn't there anything you can do to get the president to stop using the word manure? And Bess is supposed to have replied, it took me 40 years to get him to use that word. Now, that's the kind of reply I would hope the boss might... Hello, Sam. Yeah, Harry, yeah, I'm fine, Sam. I'm fine. Say, listen, Sam, I'm getting a lot of pressure from those oil boys down your way. Well, it's got to stop, Sam. Well, of course. Yes, there's no way they're going to get their hands on those Tideland oil reserves. No, of course. Well, that's right. They belong to all the people, not a few greedy bastards in a few states. Well, of course, they'd sell it right back to us again. Well, yes, the government would pay through the nose for something we already own. Well, tell them no sale, would you, Sam? All right, fine. When are you coming over to see me? I got a new supply of turkey nip in. Well, remember, Sam, there's only one thing worse than a drinking man, one who doesn't. All right. All right, I look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye. You know, when you're in this job I've got, you got to keep your eye on the money hungry. I tell you, if they had their way, they'd scar this country from one end to the other if they had a bulldozer big enough, and we'd let them get away with it. Wind up just a bunch of neon-lighted concrete junkyards. Concrete America is what it would be. Ugly squalor. And ugliness drags every one of us down. Beauty lifts us up. You know, whenever I get depressed, and I do from time to time, despair of the human race, I go and look at fellas like Franz Hals and Rubens, Da Vinci, Rembrandt. Rembrandt's Descent from the Cross is my most favorite, I would think. And, of course, music, Chopin and Bach. But we all know, every one of us, it lifts our spirits up and ugliness drags us down. You know, of course, the ugliest invention of mankind would have to be warfare, wouldn't you say? I certainly would. Of course, you know, in wartime now, it's bad for everybody, but presidents are not immune. They not only catch hell from the enemy, they catch it from their own generals. I certainly caught hell from one of my generals. He could never seem to get it through his bulletproof head that as Clemenceau once so very wisely said, war is much too serious a matter to be left to generals. Of course, Lincoln had his problems, all presidents do, but Lincoln had particularly, had 5 of them. One of them was McClellan. Do you remember McClellan? Very interesting man, General McClellan. McClellan had been a president of some Illinois railroad before the Civil War, and Lincoln, as a young lawyer, worked for McClellan. And when Lincoln became president, McClellan simply could not get it through his head that Lincoln was no longer an employee of his. In fact, McClellan acted more like the President of the United States than the President did. But McClellan suffered from conceit, of course, which is God's gift to little men. But of course, Lincoln was much too big a man to be troubled by McClellan's fantasies. In fact, he said McClellan reminded him of the fellow whose horse got to kicking around and got his hoof caught in the stirrup. And the man looked down and said, "Look here, you want to get on, I'll get off." But you know, seriously, I've always been able to understand. I've always been able to comprehend why the military sometimes has difficulty understanding the workings of a free society. Think about it. They've lived their lives in a regimented dictatorial setup. The military was never intended to be a debating society. You want to debate, get into politics. Lots to debate about. If you got anything to say, or even if you got nothing to say, for that matter. It's amazing, isn't it? The number of politicians, the less they say, the longer they stay. And I don't know how they work it. I wish I did. I have no objection on this earth to the military getting into politics. It's just that the generals seem to want to start at the very top. And sometimes we're damn fools enough to let them do just that. My problem general, of course, was Douglas MacArthur. But you know, did you know MacArthur had been out of the country for 14 long years? Well, we all know how tall a man can grow in that time. I always had the greatest admiration for Douglas MacArthur's military ability. I even understood the role he was playing for the Orientals, that of the deity. But I simply could not allow him to continue to disregard and disobey the instructions and decisions of the United States government, your elected government. Couldn't do it. Of course, our problems with MacArthur started long before Korea. Oh, heavens alive, when the Japanese surrendered. MacArthur felt that all policy relative to the Japanese should originate in Tokyo with him, not with the President of the United States. Yes, and he constantly announced pronouncements all the time in the press about our occupational policy without consulting me or anybody else in Washington. And I've got to tell you, it became rather embarrassing, to say the very least, as President of the United States, to find out what our policy was towards Japan from the morning newspapers. Yes, Rose? Oh, fine. All right, I'll be right there. Now, that's General Marshall waiting in the outer office. He's usually a very punctual man, but this morning he's 1/2 hour early. Well, last night I gave him some communiques to study that I'd exchanged with MacArthur down through the years. I want to get his views on them. You know, I may have been rather harsh just now about the military here, but I want to tell you that man waiting in the outer office right out there now, General George C. Marshall, is the most dedicated American it has ever been my privilege to know. And another one is General Omar Bradley, the finest, most brilliant field commander we've ever produced in this country. Both of those men are deeply involved in this entire Korean situation with me, and we're all concerned that it might escalate into World War III. General Marshall, come in, sir. Good to see you. Please have a chair, General. You prefer to stand? All right, sir. Fine. Well, General, yes, I agree. They are incredible indeed. I'm glad to hear you use that word. I could not agree more. Atchison. Well, Atchison says we've got to let MacArthur know who the President of the United States is. Once and for all. Simple as that. Harriman? Well, Harriman agrees. Yes, I know. It's all through every one of those communiques. Force, force, force is all the man seems to want to employ. You know, General, I think that Mark Clark said it to him best. Mark Clark said that force did not mean shooting the works, but rather to see that the enemy attack failed. Yes, sir, I know. I know. You said that you would have fired him 2 years ago if you'd known then what you know now. What about General Bradley? Well, General Marshall, would you ask General Bradley for me right now? Would you do it, sir, and let me know? Thank you very much, General, and let me know immediately. All right, thank you, General Marshall. Let me know. You know, I have no idea on this earth how we got to this pass with General MacArthur. Really, I guess 100 times in my mind I've said, what did you not do that you should have done to try to get through to the man and make him understand? I even flew 12,000 miles to Wake Island when I wanted to see MacArthur because I felt it was absolutely essential that we clear the air between us. Of course, when I arrived at Wake Island, MacArthur's plane was circling the island waiting for me to land first. Oh, yes, well, he was a play actor. He said that he had some mechanical difficulty with the plane, but I knew what he was up to, so I told my pilot to tell his pilot to get the damn thing on the ground. And they did. His mechanical difficulty cleared up rather miraculously, and he was waiting for me when I arrived. But as I say, the man was a play actor. There he was, waiting for me with his battered cap and his big sunglasses and the big pipe and the unbuttoned shirt. But you know, I've never believed in dressing a man down in front of people. No matter what a man's done wrong, if you take his dignity away from him, he's got nothing left. So I suggested that MacArthur and I take a walk along the beach. alone. You know, General, I really don't much care what you think of me. Wait a minute, as Harry Truman. But, General, what you think of me as President of the United States does concern me because, God damn it, General, that's what I am. Hold it. Now, General MacArthur, I was elected to this post by the folks back home, and they expect me to be the boss, and by God, as long as a frog is a reptile with edible legs, that's what I mean to be. Hold it. You've got to stop all this goddamn talk about going into China, General, and this reinvolving Chiang Kai-shek is the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. Why, his troops couldn't fight their way out of a Hong Kong whorehouse. And I'll tell you, General, if we re-involve ourselves in this damn thing with Chiang Kai-shek and that madam of his, they'll just use it as an excuse to rob us blind again. Yes, I said again, but they've already robbed $2 billion of the $30 billion we've already given them. You didn't know that? Well, it's high time you did, General. And another thing. You have got to stop making these public statements that are inflaming that China lobby back in the States, that McCarthy and Jenner and the little congressman from California. I can't remember his name, but anyway, they've got to be stopped. They're reckless men, General, and they're the enemies of freedom, and they could destroy us all. General MacArthur, we got a big enough job here just keeping this damn thing from blowing up in all our faces. All right. Now, wait a minute. Do you think the Chinese are going to intervene? You don't. You don't think they're going to... But, General, wait a minute. Do you see any massive buildup? You don't see any? Wait a minute. What if they did intervene? You could cope with it. They'd be inviting a slaughter? Well, all right, General MacArthur. That's going to have to do. He said he was going to have the boys home by Christmas. But he forgot to consult the Chinese on that. And they knew nothing about Christmas, so that's exactly when they did intervene. And they came across the border in the thousands, and to be very blunt about it, they kicked the living hell out of us. And MacArthur announced publicly that he could have won it if I had let him do what he wanted to do. Well, we almost lost Korea, but we hung on, and we finally turned the 8th Army around in a counteroffensive. But we had learned one very important lesson. And that was that if we let MacArthur force us or talk us into a large-scale military operation on the mainland of China, it would have been a disaster for all of us. Except, of course, the Russians, who were the true aggressors. So slowly and painfully, we worked our way up the Korean Peninsula. Finally, it looked as though an armistice might be in sight, so I started ceasefire negotiations through the United Nations, and it looked as though we might be able to contain the thing at long last, but that voice in Tokyo, MacArthur, despite repeated instructions from me to talk to me first, talk to everybody but me. He was calling for a blockade of the Chinese mainland. He wanted to bomb their major industrial centers, and he announced that publicly. Now, there I was, President of the United States, involved in a ceasefire negotiation with the enemy while one of my subordinates was calling for an all-out attack on the enemy. And listen to this. While I was in the midst of those ceasefire negotiations, and believe me, they were very, very delicate, at the same time, unilaterally, without consulting me or anybody else, MacArthur was calling for the North Koreans to surrender to him personally. Well, I simply could not allow this kind of insubordination to continue, because if I had, I would have surrendered civilian control of your government to the military. And I wasn't about to do that. The final straw came when MacArthur wrote a letter to Joe Martin, House Minority Leader. Joe Martin read it on the floor of the House of Representatives with MacArthur's permission. And in that letter, MacArthur accused my administration. He said that my administration should be indicted for the murder of thousands of American boys if we were not in Korea to win. Well, of course, the point was that we were not, never had been in Korea to win anything. We were in Korea to stop something, namely aggression. The United Nations forces were in Korea to try to preserve the peace of the world for all mankind. Yeah. Oh, yes, General Marshall. Bradley agrees? All right, fire the son of a bitch. It bothered me. It bothered me very, very deeply. There never any doubt in my mind that MacArthur was for America. We all were for America. But it's amazing, isn't it, how the old country seems to survive, even though some of us go at her with a meat axe from time to time? Always, of course, in the name of preserving her. You see, MacArthur's problem was a very, very simple one. He could not understand that his fight was not with Harry Truman. His fight was with the President of the United States. He could never see that it had any constitutional significance at all. Of course, shortly thereafter, I got myself into a constitutional briar patch. Oh, yes, I did. When I wanted to take over the steel mills in a labor dispute, I thought if they were closed down that it would seriously injure our Korean War effort. The Supreme Court said I had no constitutional right to do it. And I got brought down just like anybody else. They said, war or no war, the Constitution is paramount, and they were absolutely right. You know, the law is for everybody in this country. Of course, all administrations have their lawbreakers in them. I don't know why that is, but mine was no exception. I had some bad apples in mine, but fortunately, they were little ones. And when they were caught, they were out in the street. You know, politics is a rough game, but you know, there's a whole world of difference between rough and dirty. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'm sure by this time you all know about that letter that Eisenhower wrote to Marshall right after World War II saying he wanted to come back to the country and leave his wife and marry some English woman. Well, anyway, Marshall brought that letter in and showed it to me. And he thought it was a stupid thing for Ike to do, and I concurred. So Marshall wrote Eisenhower a letter to that effect, and it should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because in 1952, when Eisenhower finally decided that he wanted to be a Republican and he was going to run for the nomination of the presidency of that party, some of Robert Taft's people, now I never believed for 1 minute that Bob Taft knew anything about this, but some of his people found out about the existence of those letters and they wanted to use them to block Ike's nomination. Well, I heard about it, and I sent General Vaughn over to the Pentagon to see if those letters were still there. Marshall had since retired. They were, and Vaughn brought them to me, and I sent them to Marshall, suggesting that he perhaps should destroy them, and I guess he did, because they never heard from since. But that's what I call dirty politics. And I never regretted what I did on that occasion, even though Eisenhower defeated our man Adlai Stevenson in the next election. Well, he didn't defeat Stevenson. He buried him is what he did, but that's all right. But you know, Stevenson really buried himself. Oh, absolutely. Stevenson was the coyest politician I've ever known in my life. He really was Prince Hamlet. On 3 separate occasions, I tried to get Stevenson to commit himself, and I could never get the man to saddle up. He really was an equivocator. I'm telling you, he always reminded me of the old bird down in Mississippi who loved to drink, but he also loved his wife, and she hated all forms of drink. So the old boy had to get very creative whenever he wanted to get a snort. So one day he had a running nose, and he told his wife he had double pneumonia. And he said, you better go down to the basement, dear, immediately, because I'm slipping fast. He said, you'll find a bottle of medicinal bourbon left in the coal bin by some workmen. And she ran down, brought it back up. He said, now get the biggest glass we got in the house, dear. And he said, put ice in it and powdered sugar and mint and then frost the outside of the glass. And before I die, no matter how much I protest, you make me drink that. Well, we finally got Stevenson to the trough, but we could never get him to drink very deeply. I think Stevenson's biggest problem was he simply did not know how to talk to people, honestly. He spent more time trying to figure out how he was going to say something than what he was going to say. He spent more time talking to college presidents than he did to cab drivers, and we got one hell of a lot more cab drivers in this country than college presidents. Of course, now I had my problems with Eisenhower. Oh, heavens alive, on Eisenhower's inauguration day, things were so cool between us that I really thought Bess and I were going to have to walk to Union Station. But that's all right. Now, listen, wait a minute. That goes hand in hand in politics, but I'll tell you what really bothered me about Eisenhower. When he got into politics, for some reason that I could never fathom, the man seemed to lose his guts. And it really came home to me when I saw him in a photograph that he had taken, smiling broadly at and shaking hands with. It was published in all the prints. He was shaking hands with a fellow named William Jenner. Do you remember Jenner? Senator from Indiana. All right. Jenner was the man who said that General Marshall was a traitor to his country. Now, of course, Marshall was responsible for Eisenhower's entire career, and yet he never opened his mouth about that one. To be fair to him, he did try one time, rather weakly, a rather weak attempt to defend General Marshall. When Eisenhower went to give a speech up in Wisconsin, of course, Wisconsin was the stamping grounds of one Joseph McCarthy. So when I got to Milwaukee, some of McCarthy's hoods got a hold of him, and they induced Eisenhower to delete from his prepared text of the evening a defense of General Marshall. And he'd agreed to do it, and I've kept the words that he deleted in defense of Marshall. Eisenhower deleted this simply to keep from offending Mac the Ninth. All right, now this is what he was going to say, but did not. He deleted this. He was going to say, let me be quite specific. I know that charges of disloyalty have in the past been leveled at General George C. Marshall. I have been privileged for 35 years to know General Marshall personally. I know him as a man and a soldier to be dedicated with singular selflessness and the profoundest patriotism to the service of America. And this episode is a sobering lesson in the way America must not defend itself. Now, he deleted that, Eisenhower did, from a speech entitled Freedom. Never been able to understand it, honestly. Not to this day do I understand how Eisenhower could sacrifice George C. Marshall, a man who I believe to be the greatest American of this century. Sacrifice that man to curry the favor of the worst political gangster we've ever produced in this country, Joseph McCarthy. Of course, I took on that most lamentable mistake of the Almighty's every chance I got. I had to. He said that my administration were men and women with lips of traitors. Now, let me tell you, when you keep your mouth shut when something like that is said, the democratic system is simply not going to work. I had to take the man on. The question was, where? And I finally selected the state of Massachusetts. For some reason I could never understand, McCarthy was always very popular in Massachusetts. And when I went up to give a speech in their Symphony Hall up there in Boston, even the Democrats were nervous. They said, take it easy on him. Take it easy on him. Well, let me tell you, when I walked into that Symphony Hall that night, I was determined to give one hell of a concert. Governor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be back in the city of Boston tonight, and I hope in the future, if I'm ever out of a job and indigent, that you'll be as warm with your hospitality at that time as you are tonight. However, this evening I would like to deal with some of the fanatics, and in particular one fanatic who has enrolled in the so-called Great Republican Crusade of 1952. Now, this fanatic is using a technique developed by the worst criminal in the history of mankind, in my opinion, Adolf Hitler. It's a technique called the big lie. Now, you all know how that works, I'm sure. It's simply telling a lie so monstrous that it stuns the listener. And then you repeat it over and over and over again until finally, through repetition, the lie is finally accepted as the truth by the listener. Well, the lie that this fanatic is telling on my administration is that we are supposed to be soft on communism. It's a lie. It's a monstrous lie. And I state it tonight unequivocally for the record. However, the threat of communism is very real, not only in this country, but throughout the world. But my friends, that threat of communism must never, ever make us lose our common sense. And more importantly, our confidence in each other as citizens of this great land of ours. I make a pledge to you tonight that if there are discovered to be any communists in my administration, they'll be thrown out, but they will not be thrown out without the due process of law and sufficient evidence, because I still believe in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. Now, all of this uproar started when a Republican senator, a denizen of the political underworld, named Joseph McCarthy, managed to get his hands, and to this day we don't know how he managed to do it, but he did. He got his hands on some old, meaningless, out-of-date security investigations. And as I say, they were meaningless, they were out of date, they meant absolutely nothing. But this irresponsible man dumped them all into the public record. To this day, he has not been able to uncover one single communist, nor will he ever be able to uncover one single communist, because all the man carries in that bulging briefcase of his is a bottle of booze. And he manages to knock off just about one bottle a day. Now, I tell you, my friends, this man must be stopped, and stopped now, because every one of us in this hall tonight, not one of us in this country is safe from this irresponsible man, Joseph McCarthy. All you got to do is cross him. All you got to do is disagree with him, and he will set out to destroy you with every means that he can find. And as I stand before you tonight, in fact, at this very moment, the reputations of good, decent, patriotic American citizens are being butchered by this man, Joseph McCarthy. And my friends, it is an American tragedy. It is tragic. You know, I believe the happiest time I ever had in my political life was in 1948, really, when I took a long train trip across this great country of ours, and I talked to about 15 million of you people, and by golly, if you didn't give me my old job back for my trouble. It is a big country. It's a great, great big country, and you know, it always reminds me of the story of the old cowboy that rode his horse all the way from California to New York City. When he got to Times Square, an Irish cop said, "Just how big is this country, Hoot Gibson?" And he said, "Well, just about as big as your butt can stand to ride it, mister." And you know, I always believed that that was the problem with my opponent in 1948, Thomas E. Dewey. He simply could not stay in the saddle long enough. And I tried, I really tried. My train trip became known as the Whistle Stop Campaign. I tell you, we pulled into places that you forget people live in this country. I remember we pulled into a place called Dexter, Iowa, and I'd never heard of it, frankly. We pulled in there at 5:30 one morning, and there were 96,000 farmers waiting to hear me talk. Folks, you just don't get 96,000 farmers together at milking time. It is not done. And if you do, you're going to have one hell of a run on buttermilk. Of course, my opponent, Mr. Dewey, he spoke to the experts, not to the people, and every one of the experts said that I was going to lose by a landslide. And they published it, too, and I've got to tell you, frankly and candidly, that it did spread some despair and gloom on my campaign trail. Oh, my goodness. I remember one of my bright young assistants and speechwriters, a fellow named Clark Clifford, very bright young man. He came to me just before the election, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Mr. President, I think you're on the way to the gallows." And I said, "Clark, for heaven's sakes, the gallows is nothing more than a platform for the performance of miracle plays where the leading actor is translated to heaven." So we kept whistle stopping. Nice to see you. How are you? Good to see you. All right, fine, nice fun. That's a nice looking boy. What, ma'am? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Why am I running? Well, I've got to find a place to live, ma'am. Well, we got a housing shortage, and I don't want to be a burden on the community. You know how it is. What? All right, fine. We've got to move on, but before we do, may I say this to you? In parting, I want to pay tribute, very sincere tribute, to the great liberal spirit of this great state of Minnesota. And you know better than I do where that spirit derives from. It derives from a very simple word: faith. Faith first in yourselves, then in each other, and finally faith in this great country of ours. And you know, my friends, that is the kind of faith that the Republican Party simply cannot understand. I know, because I've been viewing that political party from close to for a number of years, and by golly, they won't tell you what they really believe in. I know they got a platform, doesn't mean a thing. They won't tell you, but by golly, I'm going to try to tell you what the Republican Party really does believe in. Now, they say, for example, that they have faith in the American farmer. Sure, but they're willing to let him go broke. And they say they have faith in the American home, but not public housing. And they say in their platform, if you want to read it, it's funny reading, read it. It says in the platform they want to extend Social Security benefits to more Americans. It says it right in there. And yet the 80th Republican Congress just took Social Security benefits away from 750,000 Americans. Now, do they really believe? The American people are so foolish they're going to believe poppycock like that. And they say, of course, they're for a minimum wage. You bet they are. The more minimum, the better. And of course, they say that they believe in the American way of life. You bet they do, just as long as it doesn't spread to all the folks. And they say, of course, that they admire the American government. You bet they do. They admire the American government so much they want to buy it. But by golly, we're going to tell them on election day that it's not for sale. Not now, never will be, never, ever, at any price. But no, mister, I don't give them hell. I just tell the truth on them, and that makes them feel like they're in hell. But say, ma'am, I'm sorry, how do I feel about speech making? Well, I feel very much like the fellow that was on the way to his dear wife's funeral. And the undertaker asked him if he'd mind riding in the same car with his mother-in-law on the way to the cemetery. And he said, "I'll do it, but it'll ruin my whole day." Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. What? All right, fine. We've got to go now. How many? 9 more stops before sundown. I want to thank you for listening to me. See you all on Election Day. Jose. Now, on Election Day, folks, don't you dare vote for any political party. You vote for yourselves. You vote for your interests. And that'll wind up being the Democratic Party. God bless you. just before that election, I was visited by an expert. Now, he wasn't like George Gallup or Roper. He wasn't wired for sound at all. In fact, he didn't have any machinery to speak of. His name was Leslie Biffle. And Les Biffle had been Secretary of the Senate for a number of years, and he had a very novel way of polling the populace. He got on an old spring wagon drawn by 2 mules, and he posed as a chicken peddler. And he went around and he just talked to people, and when he got through, he came back and he said, Mr. President, you've got nothing to worry about. The common folks are for you. And in that election, I did what most Americans did. I voted the straight Democratic ticket. You know, folks, that polling booth right there is the most valuable piece of real estate in this country. And if we ever sell it to anybody for any price, just forget about the whole thing. You know, my opponent, Mr. Dewey, now, he voted in that election for the party that the experts said was going to win. But you know, there was so much crow eaten after that election by the experts, the conservationists really thought the species might disappear entirely. On my way back to Washington on election eve, I had a chance to stop in St. Louis, Missouri, and I got a copy of the Chicago Tribune, the world's greatest newspaper, by its own admission. And I had a chance to read their banner headline. You know, my inauguration was very opulent, thanks to the 80th Republican Congress, because they expected Mr. Dewey to win, so they appropriated a ton of money for his inauguration. I tell you, the old town was so full of liquor, if it could have walked, it would have staggered. Just before the election, now, I found out that Mr. Dewey had a victory song written for him that was going to be played at his inaugural ball. He never got a chance to play it. But I heard it, and I must tell you, it's a very catchy little tune. And I'm going to try and render it for you this evening, in the best sense of that word, render. I really wish Mr. Dewey was here to sing it for you, because he has a fine, rich church baritone voice. But you're just going to have to put up with my rather wheezing whiskey Missouri tenor. Congratulations, Tom Dewey. You won by a landslide today. Through thick and through thin, we knew you would win. 'Cause who'd ever vote to let Truman stay in? Congratulations, Tom Dewey. Your Republican dreams have come true. Here's a victory roar for President number 34. The White House is waiting for you. To let Truman stay in, congratulations, Tom Dewey. Your Republican dreams have come true. Here's a victory roar for President number 34. The White House is waiting for you. Now let's go for a little walk. I always like to take a walk every day if I possibly can and get the cobwebs out. Hello, boys. Good to see you. How are you? No, it's good to see the press. I like the press. I'm very fond of the press. Oh, yes, it's amazing what a guy can learn from the press that he never knew about himself before. Absolutely. I agree with Thomas Jefferson, boys. You know, he said if he had to choose between no government and no press, he certainly would choose the former, and I agree with him 100%. Yes, I heard that. Yes, I heard that Richard Nixon had called Dean Acheson the Red Dean. Let me tell you something, boys. If Acheson, Marshall, and myself were traitors to this country, we are in one hell of a fix. And I'll tell you something else. Richard Nixon is a no-good, lying son of a bitch. Well, he can lie out of both sides of his mouth at the same time. I tell you, if he ever caught himself telling the truth, he would tell a lie just to keep his hand in. What'd you say? What do I feel about Kennedy? Well, I'll tell you as I walk. Could we move, boys? The President of the United States. Got to get through here. We got to keep moving, boys, at 1:20 a minute. All right. Any place around here to strike a blow for liberty? There isn't. Well, let's not go this way. What about Kennedy? Well, he's a good boy, but the father bothers me. Well, how many fathers do you know that can buy their sons West Virginia? Oh, no. Being Catholic has nothing to do with it. For heaven's sakes, it isn't the Pope that worries me. It's the Pop. This cane was given to me by the boys in Battery D. It's kind of nice. They had a little function for me on my inauguration day, and they yelled up to the dais, one of them, "Don't break it, you clumsy bastard." Oh, wait a minute, boys. I've got to watch my cussing. Nixon is very concerned about my cussing. Well, he says some kid might copy me, you see, and then have to have its mouth washed out with bourbon. You know, there's a joke going around Washington now about me, thanks to Nixon. It seems when my first grandchild is born, I'm supposed to say to Margaret, when it gets big enough, I'll teach it how to talk, Margaret. And she's supposed to say, "The hell you will." What was that? I'm sorry, son, I didn't understand. What? Oh, no, this isn't a parade, son. No, this is just old Codger trying to keep his blood flowing. That's all this is. What? Who am I? I'm Harry Truman. Who are you? What? Tim George? All right, Tim, nice to know you. How are you, son? What do I do? Well, I'm President of the United States, Tim. That's right, that's it. No, wait, no, son, I don't run the country. No. A lot of folks are involved with that, Tim. I'll tell you what I think I really do, son. I think I try to keep this country in some sort of working order so when it comes time to turn it over to youngsters like you, it'll still run. And I hope you'll do the same when it comes your turn, Tim, because it's been going on for 200 years. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Well, it's nice chatting with you, son. Say, listen, if you ever get by the White House, that's where I live, Tim. Well, your parents will know where it is, and if you ever get there, you say hello because I'd like to show you around. All right, boy, nice talking to you. Bye-bye. You know, boys, we got to keep the kids in this country stirred up. We got to keep them enthused about our history and about our future. High school kids are fine, but the college kids bother me. Well, I talk to them from time to time, and some of them seem to think they know it all. And when I talk to them, I try to point out to them it's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. What was that? I didn't hear you. What did you say? Eavesdropping. I don't know what you're talking. Oh, you mean, wait a minute. You mean listening in on telephones? The bugging, they call it? Notorious violation of the Bill of Rights. What? Super government? I don't know. You mean dictatorship? Well, why did you say that? No. Never happened. And no, the Constitution will stop them every time. In fact, I'll tell you, any fellow that ever tried it, young man, would feel like the guy that woke up in the coffin with a lily in his hand and said, if I'm alive, what am I doing here? And if I'm dead, why do I have to go to the bathroom? Now, I'll tell you something. There's only one way that could ever happen, in my opinion, and that's if we had a liar in public office. Nothing more dangerous on this earth than a liar in public office, because the people might believe him. But I tell you, if the people ever found a fellow like that, they ought to show him exactly the same amount of compassion that he showed the Constitution. No more, no less. Remember, boys, always do right. It'll gratify some and astonish the rest. Don't ever say anything like that in my presence. Don't you ever say that. No, wait a minute. Hold it. I heard what you said, and I don't... No, listen, wait a minute. This is a great country, young man, and it was built by great people. Do you realize this is the only country in the history of the world ever to hold out a helping hand to all the world's peoples, including its enemies? Well, it happens to be true. And don't you ever say a thing like that in my presence. The future, how would I know? I'm not a prophet. I have no idea. Wait a minute. Not just a minute. I don't have an answer for that about the future. But if you ever hear of a fella called Tennyson? Poet. That's right. That's a good start. All right. Did you ever hear of a poem called Locksley Hall? You never, all right, fine. That doesn't matter. You're about to hear a bit of it because I've carried this thing with me since my high school days, and I must have copied it at least 50 times just to stay up with the wear and tear on the paper. Well, anyway, here it is. Now, this is what Tennyson had to say about your question about the future. He wrote this in 1840. Remember that. He said it dipped into the future, as far as the human eye could see, and he saw the vision of the world and all the wonder that would be. He saw the heavens fill with commerce, argosies of magic sails, pilots of the purple twilights dropping down with costly bales, and he heard the heavens fill with shouting, and there rained a ghastly dew from the nation's airy navies, grappling in the central blue, and far along the worldwide whisper of the south wind rushing warm with the standards of the peoples, plunging through the thunderstorm till the war drum throbbed no longer, and the battle flags were unfurled in the Parliament of Man. the federation of the world, and there the common sense of most shall hold a fretful realm in awe, and the kindly earth shall slumber, lapped in universal law. Well, does that answer? Well, they're gone. Well, at least I know how to get rid of the press now. But I'm glad, because it leaves just you and me alone now, and I'm about to leave this office, this job, this honor that you bestowed on me. You know, one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, spoke very movingly at this moment. He said that in a free society, the rulers are the servants, and the people are their superiors and their sovereigns, and therefore for the former to return to the latter was not to degrade them, but was to promote them. Well, my promotion is to be one of you. You.